Start streaming. Okay. For Delahan in with first. God damn, man. Nice. Let me see. What is I doing? Oh, it's opening a file. Boop. So I can actually see this, and hopefully you can actually hear me. And I'm going to start working on this guy right here. Quick tap with magic tool. Send down the gain. Open up some audio. Music. Let me see. Or actually, wait, I haven't even listened to this album yet. If I can get to my... I think that's where this was. Come on. Son of a gun, what is my... Now you got me in the awkward position to try and do... Oh, that's why. Okay. Okay. Okay, I cannot bring up my SoundCloud. God damn it. Can't even remember what the hell my sign-in for that is. Let me just go to the music then. Frig it. And holiday. Pictures. Music. Holiday Halloween albums. A little bit of music underplaying to help the stream. What is 21st Century Thrilling Adventures? 21st Century Thrilling Adventures is a short story anthology featuring, I think, 12 stories now, or did it get bumped back up to 13? Featuring authors such as myself, Dan Wolfgang, whom you know from, who works with, the QQ, making those cool alt furry videos. Raul Nyanzi is also one of the artists involved. Misha Burnett, Sky Hermstrom. And so it'll be this. It's this pulp inspired action adventure anthology. There's a bunch of, and we were kind of aiming for the ideas of supernatural or unnatural threats, big adventure kind of stuff, strange things going on, heroics. Let me see, what was the... Let me go into our community on 21st Century Thrilling Adventure, one of the pinned. Dave Higgins put up the idea for the stories. Rule set. We were working with a certain rule set. One, the setting must be contemporary Earth. No 20 minutes in the future, and no 1950s or 60s or even earlier settings. The idea was it was going to be crazy adventure happening thoroughly in the modern era. That all the excitement was happening as close to home as close to the real world, or a world that could be conceived as modern as possible. Exotic so no time travel, space travel, or dimension hopping. However, exotic locations on Earth, uncharted islands, lost cities in the jungle, underground caverns are allowed, but the heroes should be from contemporary setting and purely human. High level and exotic skills are allowed, but no werewolves, mutants, or aliens. So, and on several of these, it's very much it's kind of a working class heroics and such for many of the characters. But the ideas and locations are exotic. Raul Nyanzi writing with his anime influenced Japan's semi-afterlife supernatural abilities. Shrine Maid's Revenge story. I did this story called The Real Thailand, and right now we're going to get hopefully I can get this thing done so we can get this damn thing published once we have a decent cover going. We've got another Kevin Winkless picking it up for his extant press. Rule number 2. That being said, all fantastic elements are allowed, from folkloric monsters to made-up creatures and everything in between. Magic is explicitly allowed. We are looking for stories in which humans face off against extraordinary threats. Everything has to be ramped up to 11 in some manner, either with supernatural or just explicitly unnatural forms of human villainy and cruel forms of human villainy, was it Sky Hermstrom demonstrates in his story Asteroids. Asteroids involving a brawl in a artsy fartsy kind of, you could describe it, pizza place. Right now the music you're listening to is Midnight Syndicate, one of their classic greatest hits albums. I went to see these guys in concert in Ohio last weekend, and they're just some of the greatest setting music that you can write to. Secret histories involving supernatural creatures, hidden super science, covert aliens, and the like are encouraged. So all stories must have a conflict of resolution. No stories where nothing happens, and that was a big thing. This is all science fiction and stuff. So we wanted to get back to that, harkening the heyday of the classic style of the adventure writing, you know? I honestly don't understand stories where I honestly don't understand literary fiction, and I've read literary fiction in college, and you know when it's bored and boring middle-aged people just committing adultery is the main thrust of the story. I mean, yeah, okay, there's the stuff that you use to a college professor uses to seduce their students, but younger students, but um, honestly, this is the shit that drives people away from reading. As the Pulp Rev argument, as the, you know, sad puppies and Pulp Rev and such arguments go on, you're not bringing in people with diversity when all these diverse casts do is fuck up and moan and groan about their situation, which is very much the case. You know, if you're going to have, it should still be an action and a tale of action and adventure and heroism. Of course, these are people who've also made an explicitly made war on the concept of heroism with the last few decades. We are looking for pulp action and adventure. We want danger, we want excitement, we want last minute rescues and hairbreadth escapes. That's the rest of Rule 3. Rule number 4. These were our writing guidelines. There must be a morality of some kind, but moral dilemmas and doubts can occur. We're looking for heroes who are heroic, who stand up against evil, who gaze into the abyss and punch it in the face. Sometimes quite literally. Part of one of Misha Burnett's 5 pillars of pulp writing. The 5 pillars of the pulp revival, as an article as he wrote it. One of the pillars is the moral peril. It's not just that, you know, your life is in danger, but likewise, the heroes should have some part of their morality tested or at stake. A shortfall for them could bring a greater downfall. So it's not exactly a place for the, you know, edgelordy 90s style grim and gritty heroes, anti-heroes who are just an excuse to kill the appropriate targets and standing for nothing other than, well, we're not the really bad guys. 5. Gratuitous use of obscene or profane language is discouraged. This is more of a matter of taste than anything else. We're looking to recapture a spirit of high adventure. Honestly, that's one of the stumbling blocks. I honestly don't like to write cursing myself. I agree with Misha on that. But also, it almost seems... I'm trying to think of like where people don't curse, almost like verbal punctuation a lot of the time in the modern era. And that's one of the things I'm also writing, I've also got a couple of pages into a story that I'm writing right now, and I'm like, well, how many... But I'm writing urban fiction and urban paranormal story, and I'm trying to figure out exactly how much cursing should I put in to make it have the right feel of a novel like the Animal series. That, you know, me and Hagbard will talk about these series and these books because he read a bunch of them, I guess, in prison and whatnot. And I discovered them on Hoopla, and I'm just like infinitely entertained by, you know, these we straight up thugs novels. There's something oddly endearing about this, you know, these bizarre action sequences, which are like this writer Kwan writes, that are very much straight out of a movie. Oh, let me see. Hey guys, hey. I used to do some comic writing, had several scripts, but someone would always come up and things would fall through, and the art end. Yeah, that's the art is always the hurdle. Art, I mean, like I said, this is just a cover for the project, and I found this hard enough. I was working on a webcomic for a long time, and it fell apart. And that was an annoying part of, let me see, what am I looking for now? Oh, yeah. I love it. first utility vest thing. I search utility vest, and the first things that come up are all women's. So I gotta specify men's, and I'm look at the coloring. More. So yeah, browns, gray, gray green maybe. So I'm trying to figure out where the coloring part should be. Also, you might have noticed my desktops. If you're first time watching one of my streams, all my desktops are my own photography. I have a slight obsession with going to carnivals and haunted attractions, and I love getting photos of neon and LED lights and stuff, all the colored lights in the middle of the night. Let me see. Colors, green. Let's go to the green spectrum. Not that little air, that little... Actually, no. Let's move this to northern gray, green. I think a little more gray and a little more. About there. That looks like a great color to start with. You know, it's not supposed to look snazzy. These are all. I mean, a lot of working class heroes in this anthology. A lot of Are you spoopied by the music yet? And I think it's going to be more of a thing of finding an even darker shade of this. The central cover image is inspired by Misha Burnett's short story, Black Light Ballet. And you got this maintenance guy, working class hero, and it's kind of funny because now he has a comic book project idea in mind of a horror, a slasher kind of thing, but involving kind of like a bunch of middle-aged people in a campground thing and revisiting a campground of their youth as one guy is doing property investment and there being a stalker killer. But the idea of, you know, what are the life skills of older people in a situation versus a bunch of young, drunk, horny, dumb teenagers. I blame Misha for getting the title song to Killer Clowns from Outer Space stuck in my head for several days. And it just being in there. Dun 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 dun. It's funny hearing this song, this tune right now, over and over again whenever I visit haunted houses. Bum, bum. I love the idea of a human vigilante with no powers, just a human pushing themselves into life-threatening situations in crime, which is why I love Batman and Rorschach. Yeah, Batman, Rorschach, originally the Shadow, but the Pulp era was like full of people like that, characters like that. And a few people that would have like one or two talents. You did not have a lot of flying people that flew and stuff, but you know, at the time, things like psychic powers and extrasensory perception were just getting their first discussions. So you had quite a bit of talk like about that notion of being sensitive to the unseen world and whatever. In fact, I think in Horror of Red Hook, that was one of the things that, you know, it's kind of just mentioned but then tossed away. It's never really expressed of how the cop in horror H.P. Lovecraft's Horror of Red Hook is, you know, is somehow psychically gifted or sensitive to the hidden and unseen world. And the thing is you could make a really cool movie or full-length novel about, you know, a cop with some low-level psychic ability getting into weird lengthy case. And if HP wrote full-length novels or was a crime writer, if he was a crime writer, he probably could have done a good job. He could have had a really cool premise. The thing with him was he would have an interesting idea, express it in a short story, or, you know, and then just get bored with it. And most of his work ended up just being editing other people's work into something more interesting. One of the things that he never gets enough credit for was, and I think a lot of people just do not bring up often enough, even when they're like pro Lovecraft and trying to say, you know, hey, here's, you know, why he's kind of important and everything in a panel, is like they don't understand, you know, they don't bring up what an open sourcer he was, you know, kind of an early open sourcer he was. He was like, he would go, hey, he was always willing to help out earlier and younger writers and contemporaries, but he was also always willing to, like, yeah, you want to take my ideas and run with them? You go ahead and do that, man. I don't care. I'm not going to sue you over something that appeared once in a short story. And that's why Robert E. Howard, you know, he liked the book Inexpressible Concultum, you know, the unnameable cults idea of a book, and added to the mythos with that, you know, in a kind of a semi-official capacity. And that was mainly because, you know, after naming this thing, and it was also kind of funny because you have something like, you know, Lovecraft would mention these books, these made-up books. You know, everybody knows about the Necronomicon. Some people know about in unnameable cults. But, you know, he'd name these in a story. He'd first name a couple of books, like, you know, I can't remember, was it Mary Murray's The Witch Cult in Western Europe or some shit. But The Witch Cult in Western Europe is one of the books that he brings up, and that was a real book, turn of the century book about that proposed that, you know, that gave us some of our modern framework for discussing Wicca and witchcraft. So he was kind of bringing up, it might have well been like name dropping like the Time Life book, Mystery of the Paranormal books and stuff, which is also a big influence on people like me. And Kevin Ciambeda over at Palladium Books has like the full collection on his shelf too. And I think if you've ever seen Steve Jackson's office, his book, you can recognize those black and silver lettered on his shelf too. It's like almost every role-playing gamer writer from the 80s that grew up in like the 70s and 80s, they are, you know, that was around them, they all have those copies of those books, the Time Life, Mysteries of the Paranormal. Because there's just a great collection of springboard for ideas. I mean, that was when I heard of the Undying, or the Mailing, that gets turned into the Botchling in The Witcher 3. Yeah, HP was the original fair use advocate, but he was racist, you know. Yeah. Meanwhile, you know, Stephen King writes, and everybody's talking about the orgy now in the ending of it, but, you know, people don't even go on about, like, Jeepers Creepers. The guy who directed that filmed himself having a sex with a 13-year-old boy. You know, that's like we're gonna get on, you know, and we're going to get on, you know, we're going to get on King for wrong think because it's convenient, or Squick, or he writes Squick because it's convenient at the moment to bash him for that while because he's criticizing other people. And there's this long thing of disavow. We got to disavow Lovecraft because of wrong think. When frick, we never have him. We never have anything on him being in the courts. We never have anything on him being in trouble with the law or anybody really. We never have any details of huge writer's beef or whatnot until after his death, and people started, 20 years, decades after his death, and people like Damon Knight have a grudge against him. But on the other flip side, you have, film director, molested, having sex with a teenage boy, filming it. I think he even did a couple of years worth a time, but this was after he'd done a sequel, and now there's another sequel on the way. It's like, dude. And do you? But he's one of those politically correct protected groups. But I mean, it's like that's freaking. Between him and what the hell is the name of the other director that's in Europe because because he can't come to the United States. Name begins with a P. Old dude. But he was giving drugs to a 13-year-old girl and having sex with her in a hot tub. Roman Polanski, that's the name of him. But they're the ones that the entertainment media runs coverage for. So while Milo might be bullshitting, and he might not be willing to name names, yeah. Lovecraft gave me my favorite nightmarish beings. Indeed, I love his vocabulary. I love his lexicon. Just words that pop up in his stories that don't pop up in other people's. Squamous and demoniacal. And I love the word noisome. Noisome. With noise, it sounds like noise, but no, it means it smells awful. Just a horrible stench. I can see that. It's to smell so bad you can actually hear it. You could smell it with your frickin' ears if you tried. That's how bad it smells. Like bog of eternal stench style smells, and the English language actually has a word to describe that. That little music box chime is also another one of their popular tunes. The Shapeless Horrors. He always gives such a cool description of these things too. Go with start at a lighter blue. Oop. Go down on a layer. Gotta drop down a layer. You might have noticed I'm not going as crazy as I can get with a number of layers in a Photoshop document. I can just bring that down to here, and you can see an automatic shading for it. I think I'll bring it a bit richer into the color too. So this is why I was trying to get Nathan Housley to change the name of his story from Rats in the Sewers to, I was like, you should change it to, and I can't remember what I mentioned, like something invoking choir or opera or something like that. So because then we got a ballet, and Dominica Lane's story, which she then unfortunately retracted, I guess, was titled Theater of Innocent Flesh, and I was like, theater, ballet, That's when I changed my story from the real Thailand to Dance to the Real Thailand. Because like I like the idea. I was liking the idea of like suddenly everybody's story, every other story having a title that it evoked dance or song or performance. I have to go. The annoying thing about what is it? Midnight Syndicate. This band. I'm seeing them in concert at Cedar Point, and I hate to use the term, but I gotta use the term. I got the Shaniqua. I'm just happen to be sitting behind the Shaniqua who just pops out her cell phone and is recording snaps photos for the freaking app or whatever. Using her cell phone uh, to record, and it's like 30 seconds after. Not 30 seconds of an announcement of please no recording, please no. And I happen to be sitting behind the only person to actually, because and at that moment I'm actually looking around, and I never see another cell phone the entire performance. It was just this one gal right up until like only a couple of seconds before an usherette comes over and asks her to not. But it's like literally the same within a minute of this, like maybe 30 seconds after they make this announcement, please don't, in respect to the performers. And of course, it was a black one. It does this. It is like, God damn it. I uploaded a video of my. I did take though myself, and it was an outdoor performance, the Scouts and Crew, and that's on my Barwin Scorpio channel right now. But I mentioned also the band because that little music box chime is a recurring theme in their concert performance. This weird thing, this kind of like storylet that plays out in videos while they're doing the concert of this music box that summons up ghosts in shipment and being shipped from one place to another, and people kept on having accidents or purposefully opening the music box and then getting attacked by the dead. What did Lovecraft write that was racist? He, if you write things, if you look at, his opinions on, some say the street is his most like, just outright racist work, or his most anti-foreigner. Um, it's kind of bizarre because, or the voodoo practitioners in New Orleans or Louisiana in the Call of Cthulhu. Or frequent use of the terms like mulatto and whatnot, which nowadays carry a lot of connotations. Terrible Old Man. People have complained have racist overtones because the surnames of the three criminals are like Irish, Italian, and Polish names. Which is also kind of like a funny thing because I was like listening to the H.P. Lovecraft literary podcast years ago when they were still free, and I'm listening to the story Arthur. What is it? Arthur Germain or whatever? No, not him. Not Arthur Germain. Not the White Ape. Not the one where there's a haunted portrait and the named character is Joseph Kerwin. Um, Trying to remember the name of the damn story because Lovecraft writes this story about a haunted portrait wherein a sorcerer possesses his descendant centuries later through this haunted painting, and the painting ends up as this guy is researching his family. Joseph Kerwin, or yeah, is researching his family's history and Massachusetts, whatever. The house is that this painting is located underneath the plaster of a wall is owned by a black couple, and they're described as being poor but hardworking and decent. These this poor old but hardworking and decent couple, and I'm like, is this Lovecraft letting go his racism? And I actually asked the podcast this, and ST Joshi is answering. An episode later is like, well, yeah, no, but he's mentioning that the characters, this the only time you really see a black people described personally in a Lovecraft story as upfront characters, even if not important, not like central to the story and unnamed, they were based on a couple of employees of his aunt's when he was, young, or like a maid and her husband, one working as a maid and her husband, and it's like, so you kind of have this what is I'd call bizarrely the racist paradox, where a person can go at length of, oh, these people, they aren't this, they ain't that, and they can blah blah blah, except for this one that I know personally. They're my best friend. I'd die for them. They're the best, great people, most wonderful people in the world, most wonderful person in the world. It's that tribal abstraction. It's that it's trouble versus abstraction versus individuals and knowing people. Now, admittedly, you can't take exceptions to the rule and placate to the rule as the rule, either good or bad. But the more individuals that you tend to know, the wider breadth of experience that you have, the more you can kind of make an assessment culturally. So it's curious that, and that's why I call it the racist paradox. You have so many people that will say, N-word ain't nothing but blah, 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 or white people, blah, 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 except they've always got these exceptions, and they'll have dozens of people that they work with relate to that defy their stereotypes. But unfortunately, I actually and I work with plenty. Work at a really multicultural place. I'm like, which is also what I'm like pissed off with SJW Marvel. I can see like a lot of what Tommy Sotomayor's complaints about black women are as being accurate, but also this is also why I get more pissed off at SJW Marvel, because I work with plenty of young black girls in my day job, and it's like none of them have that short crop bull like hairstyle that every female like in Black Panthers the Crew have or whatever. It's like they wouldn't be doing that. Oh my god. Like, you're trying to rope in African American readers with these books, and like these women will not draw in. When black women will not relate to these black female characters, maybe, well, except for Riri doesn't also act like a teenager either. They always like they. Big example. Medusa's coin. It would be too hideous if they knew that the one-time heiress of Riverside, the accursed Gorgon or Lamia, whose hateful crinkly coil of serpent hair must even now be brooding and twining vampirically. God, that's a great description. Around an artist's skeleton in a lime-packed grave beneath a charred foundation was faintly, subtly, yet to the eyes of genius, unmistakably the scion of Zimbabwe's most primal grovelers. Ah, no wonder she owned a link with that old witch-woman Sophonisba, who, for in deceitfully slight proportion, Marceline was a negress. So like a great story with twists and turns and suspense. The big reveal is that the villain is an octoroon or something. Not only that, but God damn it! Honestly, in a story like that, with that old witch woman Sophonisba, there is like half chance if you Google that name Sophonisba, it would actually turn up as a real like popular voodoo priestess that was like in the newspapers or some shit. And the 19 teens or the 1920s. I mean, because that's the thing that's the kind of stuff that actually that was the thing is like it's not just a product of his time or whatever you could give that excuse to, but it's also he would actually research, he would actually be into the news on all of this shit, which was so amazing because like you can go in and like you read the dates on Lovecraft's Call of Cthulhu. And I think when he mentions like an earthquake, there was actually an earthquake that day. That the day that he mentions. That was his attention for detail. He would do things to give his stories like a ripped from the headlines appeal. Which a lot of the best stories can kind of do. Take something mundane and then ramp it up into the fantastical. I'm not sure how I feel about alt hero. It part of my problem is also the mistake of it seems like, oh, we're going to do our own superheroes or whatever. I mean, there was a decade ago, there was like in Liberality for All, and it was somebody doing like a satirical, an overarchingly satirical superhero comic where it was like Sean Hannity and stuff and and different talk radio presenters. And I always think like trying to compete with the big two in the superhero milieu is a mistake. Well, maybe My Hero Academia is actually disproving that, is putting a chink in the armor, because that is, I don't know, I feel like My Hero Academia is becoming more popular than a lot of the Marvel titles with the young fandom, and probably because they're doing the X-Men, Earth's most powerful teenagers. They're actually doing it in a way that is, hey, they're actually living up to that tagline. The X-Men are all in their 30s and 40s canonically, and you'd hate me if I was a Marvel writer, because I was just thinking like, I just want to do a book. If Archie is going to be just a stupid bunch of bullshit now, I'd rather do, let's do an X-Men title where it is the school, but more in the vein of Community, or any number of High School Musical kind of High School Musical superpowers, superpower teens. Why the hell not? Let's actually do all these X-Men, Earth's most powerful teenagers are, they're all middle aged now, but actually let's try to do the let's let's actually have the school itself center on the teaching the classes. Frustrated mutants that aren't like superhero caliber mutants, but just trying to teach other kids like how to balance their damn checkbook and whatnot. Actually, because there's always the meme too of like people criticizing. There's always the meme of people criticizing the wizarding world of Hogwarts in that school of like, yeah, could any of these kids? It's always like potions and incantations and stuff, and it's like, can any of these people understand how to do their taxes, or do they understand marketing strategy, or do they understand any practical value life knowledge at this school? Is anything being taught at all? No. Every once in a while a troll attacks. That's not practical. What is this thing, maths, that you speak of? They're never in math class or whatever. Raindrops. Hey, we're doing pretty good, man. Just fucking around. I am coloring a belt. We have. I decided the best way for me to do some artwork is for me to stream, get some, because I've got to make some progress on this image before I run out to Bridgeport Gore Grounds tonight. My Hero Academia is like if in the Static Shock universe they were all okay. All these kids have powers now. Let's nip this thing in the bud. Yeah, exactly. You always see the like, the government's out to hunt the special teenager, the special kids. It's never like, maybe we should just. I don't know if I think I've shared to the group. I've shared to the Pulp Rev group the cover sketch, but you guys never saw the ink. And you guys, well, you certainly haven't seen this colored or in mid coloring. You isolate items and just kind of, you know, color inside the lines. I can use the same black and white. Dun, dun. Paul, remind me that I'm accepting quite considerably less for this cover, actually, for Kevin Winkless. So, honestly, to even that out, man, remind me if you want to tap me for interiors or another cover for Kursova, to toss a hefty discount your way for your next piece. Because that was too much fun to. That was just too much damn fun to actually draw. Here I am getting and diving into the minutia again, though, on a what's going to be a 2x8. Let's see, a 5x8 drawing. Also a hard thing to do. Which is also a hard thing on me. But yeah, I do these streams because it's actually I get more done. I think quicker than if I'm. The facade of the sanctioned good heroes fighting the villains in the streets. It could collapse into dudes with powers just killing each other in the streets. Also, My Hero Academia, 80% of humanity has powers. Like I said, it's kind of a set of Kingdom Come. Current, honestly, when it comes to like comic books and superhero titles, I only read like I haven't actually read the book in years, but I've been buying the book. I got this huge to be read stack of Fred Perry's Gold Digger. He's a great and classic artist. Look at this cover. You got bugs and rats and spiders and clowns. Also just crazy stuff. Stain was very thoughtful and fitting role. Honestly, I what I like is Adam Warren's Empowered actually is one of the best just outright satires. And this is why it's like after like watching diversity in comic streams, it's like God, I their humor is so bad in these, their attempts at satire are just so off, missing the point when you read something like Adam Warren's work. And it's kind of funny because it's like things like social media profiles and YouTube's and stuff of channels make such an important part in the empowered universe. It's not like 80% of the population has powers, but superhumans have existed for so long and are so mainstream. You have people who are running fantasy superhero teams, like fantasy football. You have Purple Paladin Memorial Hospital in this one city. Did that actually playlist repeat? No. Nope. But let me see. Night, Halloween Hootenanny. Spooky sounding Halloween. into. Let's see. The clown looks great. Thanks. I mean, yeah, it's just yeah. Misha Burnett's thing is okay. That's a quick. That's why we have the undo button. I mean, if you want to really go into detail on the, let me zoom out a bit. But I mean, you got the shading, but then I was also going in like this on the teeth. And in fact, I think I'm going to change up my Does it work? Nah. No, I don't think it does. Nah. Ouch. Not that one either. Right. Oh, wait, what the hell did I do? Well, let's see. I liked it. It was kind of. It's kind of interesting in the very anime derivative. The only the only major uh, fault I would find in it is, but then again, that might that does kind of have an excuse for it in story. Um, is the because that is the point of fracturing, anyways. Just the when the Shrine Maiden is like that instant lip that an excuse is. When she's getting a dressing down from the master of the dojo, which is like hardly within, you'd think would be within the realm of how they play in Japan. But then again, that's also an integral part of the story. So maybe I'm just reading it wrong. Overall, it was kind of interesting. It was pretty interesting. And I gotta admit, I'm not an expert on all things Nippletown, Japanese. There's a lot of everything. Everybody's story was, I included my own, was very hit and miss. I mean, it was like was Higgins himself had a bunch of ideas, which actually meant me chopping out a bunch of stuff in my story with the edits that I was offered, and actually adding a section because I think it was Higgins was putting it that the hero seemed, in my story, it seemed like the hero had it his own way too easily, way too far throughout the thing. So I add this entire sequence where the protagonist almost gets fucking drowned by the creature, by being just pinned underwater in the ocean, getting knocked by just that huge tongue knocking him flying into the ocean just as he's grabbing a weapon, his weapon, and nearly drowning him until he gets saved by the old dude, Maddox. So there's more of a feeling of, yeah, back and forth. And you got to deselect the area that you're working with when you... Ooh. I thought it didn't help that Nathan Housley's story, and I added this, a note to him, was there wasn't really a description of the rat creatures in his story, and something like that always, like a first encountering a creature, just, it can help to have that, like those nice Lovecraftian descriptions. And now on to another series. But this is the season for Rugo's descriptions of the uncanny, spooky, scary skeletons. My only real criticism for Dominica's story was it wrapped up a little too tightly, even though it, like, because it really felt like it was it wrapped up too cleanly, given everything that was happening and all the implications. That said, it was really good, and it was the when the guy hands off a rifle after acquiring it to somebody else to stay with his pistol. It's like, the pistol is something used to get to a rifle. This is one of those rules of a firefight. honestly, I like doing this stuff because any chance to work on projects that I'm not used to. Let's see. How many people are actually still in here? Yeah, yeah, the clown looks like he hasn't brushed in ages. Yeah. Creepy cannibal clowns, possibly undead. These old radio commercials. I love Halloween and haunt music. Mm-hmm. 21st Century Adventure is going to kick so much butt. This is what Pulp is all about. Exactly. I mean, did you see that Facebook post? There's like a Facebook back and forth between Larry Correia and some guy, I think named Glenn or something, and Brian Niemeyer put that into because he's about, oh, nobody's writing hard science fiction anymore and the fandom is dying because of it. And the Pulp argument is it's the killing of Pulp that killed science fiction. But just Larry just destroyed the guy. And I don't really register. I really don't register Larry Correia's voice. So instead, I just imagine Adam Baldwin doing Larry as from the Tom Stranger audiobook. Hi there, I'm Larry Correia, owner of Correia Tech, the internet, the multiverse's largest arms manufacturer and retailer. Ooh. Hey man, it's a talking narwhal. Woon. Those are fighting words. Yeah, that freaking it's kind of funny because you got these people like, oh, what about the, you know, and you look at the way the guy wanted it. And it's kind of funny because also when they start saying hard sci-fi, it's like, all right, make your writing points, define your terms. What the fuck is hard sci-fi? What the hell do you want in a story, and then market that. It's kind of funny because I'm listening to Haunt Weekly, which is a couple of SJWs in the haunt industry themselves, because I kind of recognize them. It's kind of funny. First, they're not able to recognize the idea of they don't understand what a SJW is. And I'm like, I can pretty much point to specific instances in your podcast where you guys are. In fact, there was another one where it's like they had an entire podcast that was like, I think episode 85, where they're talking about like, oh, things you should stop putting in haunts, and things were like voodoo houses or the rednecks, quit making fun of poor people, whatever. Things that they were getting personally offended by. And I'm like, you guys are at total. And I'm like, I post a meme to try and say, here's the difference between an activist and an SJW. Because you guys are kind of going into SJW territory. Like on haunted attractions where it really doesn't belong. But they've been complaining about, like, they've been very politically correct and kind of complaining for a while, and it's kind of funny to listen to them. Brian Emer calls it big men with screwdrivers. Yeah, and the funny thing is, like, because I mean, I do like, that's kind of what I did like about the movie. Because yeah, you have a lot of adventure. You can have a lot of adventure with big men with screwdrivers. That's what I liked about That's why I'm such a big proponent of Passengers. You know, and it was kind of funny because for those who want to really dive into the symbology of the movie Passengers, you have a guy who's going to this off-world colony to be a mechanic. You have this girl who's a journalist and a writer. So it's like, it's very, very feminine version of the feminine mind, very masculine version of the masculine mind, as the Adam and Eve of this kind of story. It's kind of bizarre because they did monomyth better than Prometheus. You know, Prometheus is like, oh, we're going to be doing like a Bible story kind of thing, origins of mankind and stuff, and they fuck it up so bad. Mainly because everybody just acts stupid for no good reason throughout the entire movie. That's one of my biggest beefs. Going into a horror writing thing, I was talking to, like, some people were talking about doing a monster movies at midnight, Motor City Nightmares, a horror convention, and I'm just sitting on this workshop round table, and it's kind of funny watching people take notes when I say things like, hey, don't have your characters make wrong decisions, don't make them do stupid shit, have a good reason for them doing everything. You know, it's kind of a stupid, cheap cliche to have people just in the woods and people like being dumb and stuff. That's one of the most stupid things I hate in horror movies. And it's so much more impressive if you have somebody doing, like, people saying like, oh, this is a decision I would make, and that person still dies anyways because, you know, hey, that monster or whatever is just that much more powerful. I think this is where also the pulp ended up. For a brief period in the 70s, you had these exploitation films that would have these at times preposterous plots and themes, but by God, they were just so unapologetically over the top on action. when you talk about big metal screwdrivers, when you talk about, but yeah, it's like it's so little of, and but that's the problem. So little of the so few of what the hell is hard sci-fi. You know, what the hell do you know? You can ask these guys, well, what the hell do you want? What defines hard science fiction for you? And so often it'll be, I mean, they might as well be explaining, describing. They might as well be describing a goddamn you know, softer sci-fi or space fantasy, space opera or mill SF, but you know, maybe update diversity or some shit. And you look at what the big thing that they all want is like Starfleet and anyways, it's like you're gonna try to tell us hard sci-fi when the biggest properties are still Star Trek and Star Wars, and what are you gonna talk about? You know, and some of the biggest, you know, hey, 20 minutes in the future science fiction that still gets sold, even, you know, it gets new, you know, releases, even though, you know, the writer's long dead, are things like Ayn Rand and whatnot. I think what they do, and I think the problem that they have is, I think the problem with Mill SF, the reason why the quote unquote hard sci-fi crowd hates military sci-fi, is because they can't hack it. They can't dive in there and tell these stories because they're so code pink at this point. They can't write a military. They can't really make it feel believable. They can't make military experience feel believable. You've got a bunch of guys. You've got a bunch of vets coming home from, you know, Afghanistan. You've got, you know, Bragg Torgerson, you know, he was deployed to the sandbox how many times? So he can write this shit and it will feel authentic in a way that so many other writers will not be able to make it sound. Yeah, you have an English degree, but you know, you never spent time in the sandbox. You never actually spent time, and you despise the military in general. So you don't hang out with soldiers. So you don't hear, you know, like how, you know, you don't try to pay attention to their style of talking and discussion. The whole premise of Larry Creed's Monster Hunter International is what happens when you replace typical protagonists with horror movies with gun nuts and combat veterans. Yeah, and that's kind of the funny thing is like, in the, what is it? Well, yeah, and there's a big difference. I keep on complaining about what is it? Mark Titullo's Zombie Fallout. Compare that to John Ringo's books. Compare that to John Ringo's Black Tide Rising. Because way too many of it's that horror movie protagonists are idiots problem in Mark Titullo's Zombie Fallout. It's like, here's the clear mistakes that are going to get everybody killed. Here's, you know, and it doesn't, to me, that kind of stuff checks me out of the story, honestly, because, you know, when you try to make, you know, because it's so often of like you're trying to make somebody, oh well, we got to make these like within the realm of possibilities, or like the Bella Swan syndrome. A mother, I was listening to talk radio, and this one mother calling in, what was it, the Michael Medved show, I think it was talking about why her daughters liked, you know, she's like, why do you like these Twilight novels? And the big reason for them is, like, the girls reading those books was her daughters and their friends were, you know, because, you know, the mom's complaining, Bella's so stupid, and it's like, yeah, mom, she's stupid, but she can still find love, and maybe we can too. Then we're smart. We keep on reading and saying we're smarter than this. Maybe we can do it. But on the opposite end of that is like, Well, you combine that idea with a zombie outbreak, apocalypse novel, and it's like, well, how the hell did these protagonists actually, just plot armor luck into surviving this many weeks into it, or even days to begin with, because they're all dumb and they don't have any preparedness. There's no prepper mentality here that would save your ass in this situation. Really, then, really sci-fi, really, then, how the hell, might I add, are you able to talk or respirate? Your heart is not breathe. Your heart's not. If you're between heartbeats. And honestly, I don't think you'd even need combat veterans or gun nuts. Just any of it, me and you know Hagbart Celine on his side too. We're kind of like getting obsessively watching things like Mike Rowe and Dirty Jobs, and Mike Rowe is always on about like, hey, what about the general life skills? And so few people have this shit. It's kind of funny. I'm reading this, and then like last night I was reading this story in the Guardian about here's adjunct profession professors and they're homeless and they are doing sex work. One of them is a sex worker. A couple of them are homeless or near homeless or cohabitating, like four people living in four women all living in one house. And like part of me is just like half these women I'm just thinking, well, where is your husband to help you out with the bills? you and it's like, and it doesn't really, and it rarely discusses what they're teaching or what their degrees are in too. So it's like, you guys probably all have pursued useless degrees, and you were wasting your 20s being, the twinkling 20s. I don't have to be serious about finding a man or finding somebody to help me out with my life. I'll have a degree. Jim Fear is missing out on this. This song is basically female Frankenstein's. This is a monster waifu song. I mean, you can see this song is so cute and goofy, but you could like hell. This is that kind of that silly, fancy, lighthearted, fanciful, lighthearted science fiction supported. Yeah, you're supposed to be hearing music. I always play. I always have an underplay of music when I'm doing streams, whether instrumental and I just talk over it, or if I crank it up and we can listen to a song. Um, but I always do like a simultaneous because if it helps fill in the gaps if I'm not talking. So it's something I do. But I was like, I'm just thinking about this song. It's such a goofy song, and so many of these songs of that era. I mean, Jeffro Johnson could talk about like listen to these songs. God damn it! Listen to the songs from the 20s. Listen to the songs from the 30s, and compare that to the nowadays. Not only was like in the 50s and 60s there was this huge thriving era of novelty music. Like you could get before the Beatles, you could actually get before Elvis and the Beatles, you could actually get big doing not it wasn't just the big band, but there was this huge novelty music industry, and you could get big being Weird Al Yankovic. Imagine like every fifth musical recording artist was a Weird Al Yankovic putting out these bizarre little goofy hop songs with comedic lyrics and maybe some semi-risque lyrics for those who could recognize the terminology or could extrapolate from there. And we've honestly lost a sense of fun in the post-Christian era as the post-Christian society as Jeffro Johnson refers to it. And I kind of understand where he's coming from on a lot of these things. I might not entirely agree with a lot of people's final conclusions, but I can certainly recognize and understand the premises that that many of us are starting from, and I do see the problem that they're also seeing, and I think that's why also when you have so many people want to, and I think this is first stage denialism, with much of the left in reaction to the alt-right and they're punching Nazi memes, because they don't want to engage the questions because they're afraid, and I do think this is true, that the alt-right and the hoteps, and you want to talk about white nationalists or black nationalists, let's talk about the hoteps too, but a lot of these a lot of these guys are maybe coming to the wrong conclusions at the end, but they're starting from the right questions. They may have the wrong answer, but they have the right question. They may have they're starting off of proper recognizable premises based on what they're going through. And the left will have to accept some faults in their ideology or their prescription for societies if they even entertain the notions, which is why they're getting so violent, which is why there's this violence that we see going on, because they're afraid that they might come to the same conclusions if they entertained if they entertained that premise. But they're not going to win converts by bullying, and they're not going to win the argument by shutting it down. They're not going to defeat this by throwing punches. What you got to do is say, well, you have to come up with a better answer to the questions. And it's not that hard to do. This is kind of also why I like Kathy Young. Because she was kind of early on able to recognize, hey, wait, no, these are also patterns that, Cool. Red Fox got to start doing novelty dirty blues records. Exactly, and it's kind of funny. Even listening to dirty blues albums, God, it's you know you could. I was watching a YouTuber, young black guy doing a YouTube video about Satanism and stuff, and its relation to Kesha's Die Young. And I will say, not, it's the triangles aren't Illuminati signs or whatever, but pedophile slang or whatever in that music, but the wasteful party girl nihilism was not a bit, even in the old blues and jazz, you still wouldn't recognize that tone of nihilism in the partying, in the party music, like you have now in the modern age. That's the bizarre thing. It's not even it's back then it's a notion of we will be we might be wasteful and partying tonight, but this is all part of a healthy lifestyle that we're going to return to in the morning. Nowadays, a lot of that pop music is we're doing this to merely escape our nihilistic depressive state, which we're not doing anyways. So yeah, there was a huge sea change in the 60s in the culture, and we're still not recovering from it. And then to avoid the question, to avoid the premise, anytime somebody says, conservative, well, what do you want to serve? You want to just go in the 50s when it was like separated bathrooms and water, drinking fountains? And it's like, no, never said that. But you can't tell, but you got to tell them, yeah, I'm going to need you to listen to about 5 hours of music from the 1920s and 30s, even the dirty blues. Notice that there's, even in their dirty songs, their notorious kind of music back then that we've kind of all collectively forgotten about it. There's still a talent there that we don't embrace nowadays, that there's still a love of life and a Christian worldview that we've relinquished, a joyous Christian worldview that we've relinquished in the modern age, and is unhealthy in the modern. You'll understand exactly how unhealthy the modern age is. Now, if you want to go Return of Kings, you can say that also look at the male mind and compartmentalization. We kind of talk about how the male brain is, hey, it's a series of drawers, and you open up the things and at a time, and boop, you run off that program for the time. Well, women are like a bundle of wires and everything in communication at once. And even if you're going into the more seedier aspects of life and the more patriarchal, give me a second. Yeah, so you talk about like in a purely patriarchal society, you might have a lot of these um, seedier parts of life, aspects, but they'll also be committed to their unique place, their unique context, and a specific time for them. Ah, I made this in a comment when earlier in the summer. And Brad Torgerson, I made this a comment on Brad Torgerson's board, and he carried it into a post of his own. part of the society we've lost, I think, is in dress and clothing. We make fun. We kind of make fun of the people at Walmart. How they people will go dressed into places, but we really don't do anything to correct it. And that wasn't part of my post, but what I was talking about, because we were talking about BLM, and you see a lot of these guys running around in the streets without their shirts on and shit. And it's like, my point is, people took Martin Luther King seriously partly because you don't have a photo of him outside of a full business suit. He was a businessman, and he was there, him and his people were there to do the business of men. These were serious, and they dressed as they were as seriously and as importantly as their convictions and their ideas were. I mean, you can talk about how crazy people are dressing nowadays and Discordian. Much of the alt-right, these people in the alt-right aren't very serious about it. It's, all t-shirts and all this stuff. And then, of course, you got the occasional base stick man who is literally, because of necessity, dressing like a fucking hoplite. And that also, because people are dressing for the times and the discourse. It's militarized now. The Black Bloc started this. But this is in progress. Nobody's progressive exactly, and this isn't fixing it. Nobody's really dressing to be respected, and that was a thing. That was a big thing that men lost. I think was always going outside with a hat and a button-down shirt and a jacket. I mean, look how Lovecraft dressed. Look how these guys dressed, and it was like, yeah, they everybody, all those photos, everybody was wearing a suit. And you go to these extremely patriarchal societies where you understood that there was a time and a place for these things, and know when to shut it down, and knew when to. That's kind of funny, because those are some of our best traditions. Come from the idea of, it's going to be business, 300 days of the year, and then interspersed throughout, though, we're going to have something like Mardi Gras. And we're not going to try it, but we're not going to try and make this where we let our hair hang out and we dress up as these nights of revel, these nights of folly, which we were watching on Hagbard's channel last night. Mike Rowe is in this, what is it, Alabama Mardi Gras festival that actually predated Louisiana, predated the city of New Orleans. And there's these nights of folly or whatever, and there's this gentleman's club society, doing their typical fundraising and just being, buddies, and throughout decades. But they wear these, crazy jester costumes and whatnot. They have bladders on a stick, but the thing is, it was compartmentalized. You wouldn't go dressed like a jester everywhere you went, every day of the year. I don't think a lot of people understand that. They don't understand how to switch off. And they don't understand what should be switched on the majority of the time. And part of that is because we've lost that male-led society. The masculine... What the hell happened? Still streaming, it says. Hey, QQ is interested in buying a commission, Ben. Do you accept cryptocurrency? Am I still... Okay. Do I accept cryptocurrency? I guess I could. I have a PayPal. I guess I could adjust something to accept cryptocurrency. I probably should. I mean, I have a Patreon. I have a PayPal. And I guess I could, accept, Yeah. That is, yeah, that I have honestly never considered cryptocurrency in general. And that is something I probably should look into. I'm going to be doing about 20 more minutes of this, and then. But yeah, my PayPal is bar1scorpio at hotmail.com, my regular email. Although, right now, as far as commissions go, in a couple of days, I'm going to be going into the Iron Man. The Iron RS Challenge at Drawloween, which I do as commissions. So it's gonna be like that entire month is just gonna be me trying to knock out pencil sketches every day. I also like what I think it was I think it's Larry Correa. I think Howard Taylor was mentioning at a panel I was at one year over in Michigan Convention that I think he was attributing to Larry Correa was saying that um, I, this is kind of in him to say is that horror is the most moral of genres because in horror it's not all cultural relativism. It's not there's no moral relativism. There is a tangible, pervasive evil in the world, and it wants to destroy people. A good. And that's an important part of the pulp was there wasn't room for moral relativism. There were good guys, there were bad guys, and this was kind of defined, and it wasn't defined vaguely by thoughts or feelings. It was there was activities. It was people's actions defined them. You're what you do, not this is just a mask. And way too often they try to back people away from that. There's almost a constant call to make excuses for some of the most rotten of human behaviors. I think you need a Coinbase account for that. Okay, I'm gonna have to look into Coinbase. I was planning on going to dinner, and then I was gonna come home or well, wasn't. I was thinking of going. I'm gonna go to Bridgeport Gore Grounds. I'm gonna try out this Z-Tag stuff. In fact, I'm gonna call up, see what I can do to call up YouTube. Back to back, belly to belly, I don't give a damn cause I'm stone dead already. Back to back, belly to belly, the zombie jamboree. The version by Rockapella of this song is a lot more famous. Belly to belly, it's a zombie jamboree. Let's see. I'm going to pause my music for a moment. I want to play this commercial. Hopefully you guys will get the audio of this. Let me scroll this back for you guys, but And Bridgeport Gore Grounds is the only spot in Michigan um, that is currently actually hosting Z-Tag. Oh, darn it. Okay, so it didn't show the video on the video. Dang it. Okay. But yeah, that's what I'm going to be doing later tonight. That will be getting in the way of my jumping into Coinbase immediately. But I was planning to run it. I try to hit up as many of these places. I've hit up almost every running haunted house in the state in the last couple of years. So I've only got a couple more, but those are like really out of the way. Like it's a 3-hour drive for me to the Niles Scream Park in Michigan, and then I'm going to start going and poking into Ohio, I think. And since if I don't do Theater Bazaar next year, because after $100+ at Cedar Point, I can't do $200 ticket events. Let's see, a woman. Oh, that's a good flesh tone. Is that even edit fill? Shading, I think I want to go with a loose. But I want to go even larger. It's not just that this girl is standing a bit further back and going to be shaded. She's also been locked in a cage for a month by killer cannibal clowns for some time, or at least some time on different times. So she's going to be kind of a mess. Flirted cemetery. I think this will probably be the last 10 minutes. So, but yeah, these are my obsessions. But horror, as much as you have more of the pulp ethos to them, to a lot of horror stories, there's often the guarantee though of a downer ending. Especially in the short form, you're pretty much guaranteed that your protagonist is not going to make it out. I'm listening to a modern horror test of called Twisted 50, and it's kind of interesting as audiobook production because it is, like they say on it, 50 authors, and each author's story has a different audiobook narrator. And I've got this on Hoopla Digital, which I'll heartily recommend. It's great system for getting everything. You can get comic books on it. You can get digital comic books for a week. You can get streaming video, movies, audiobooks, music, and through your library. It's ebooks, audiobooks, streaming movies, comics and whatnot through your library. So for free. You get them for a limited time. You check them out like you do your local library, and then they automatically scrub from your digital device when your borrowing period is over. And if you're only going to listen to an audiobook or something once, if you're only planning on listening to something or watching a movie once, you don't have, save the rental. You're technically, I mean, if you have a library card, you're technically already paying for this shit, really. That's how it is works. I think I can go a shade paler on her. And I'll add, I think, a bit of blue tinting to her skin as well. And back. Oh, that's good to see. You can't hear the. Oh, you couldn't hear the audio for the Z-Tag commercial too either. Okay. Ah, which is an annoyance. And a bit more. Guys really reaching for rhymes. You look at some of these dances and it was like really simplistic moves, which is kind of funny. It's like you just gave them a weird name. That's how they got popular. And it's not Gangnam style, where you're throwing a lasso and bouncing on your balls of your feet and. Oh shoot! Saving the file is always very important because I am prone to delete. I'm so prone to deleting a file or closing out work and on a thing and not having saved it and losing like several goddamn hours. You can see like with the black back, it's going to be a general black background with a bit of color gradient for a light. You're going to have this entire area is nicely ready for your main text, you know. And got a weird alien and green. When I try and overarchingly theme these in colors. The thing is that the middle drawing here, this was going to be for Theater of Flesh, so I got to remove that, and instead it's going to be a woman with playing cards, with a sultry look on her face. But that's our start. I think about a third done of this, which is a good progress. I'm going to head to dinner, guys. I'd like to thank you for joining me and keeping me on track. I'd like to thank you for comments and questions. In future times, I'm thinking I'm probably going to stream midday Sunday, actually, too. And see what I can get done there. And see what I can get in combat. I might actually try to do that with instead of OBS, I'll use and music. I will try to use Google Hangouts, and maybe somebody can pop on if they want to and chat with me while I draw. But let me close out OBS. Stop.